Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take your chosen sources and, well, distill the most important knowledge. Today, you've asked us to unravel a really fascinating question. It sits right at the intersection of corporate governance and environmental action. The question is, how does gender diversity in leadership actually influence a company's approach to climate change? We're diving into a pretty cutting-edge academic paper here. It's from the Accounting Forum. The title is, Does Gender Diversity in Corporate Boards and Executive Management Teams Influence Carbon Performance? Evidence from Europe. Long title. Our mission, as always, is to pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts from this research, giving you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on this vital topic. And I think this deep dive uncovers some unexpected connections that might just change how you look at company leadership. Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we get to the findings, I think it's crucial we understand what the researchers were actually measuring. When they talk about carbon performance, it sounds simple, but it's not just less carbon, is it?
No, exactly. You're right. They used two distinct measures to really get a handle on carbon performance. First, they looked at something called procedure-oriented carbon management performance. Let's call it PCMP. It's easier.
PCMP. Yeah.
And this is basically a comprehensive index, a score from 0 to 21. It assesses a company's documented stuff, policies, procedures, initiatives. Think of it as their commitment to climate action on paper.
Okay, so like written strategies for climate risk, carbon reduction plans,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Precisely. Developing energy efficiency, sustainable supply chain management, even, green building practices. A higher score here just means better procedural performance. It's about the framework.
Right, the framework.
Yeah.
And the second measure.
The second one was real carbon emission reduction performance, or RCRP. Now, this one is all about actual tangible results. It's based on the company's total Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions.
Ah, okay. So if I remember correctly, Scope 1 is like the emissions from their own factories, their own vehicles.
Exactly. Direct emissions.
And Scope 2 is more indirect, like from the electricity they buy.
You got it. And for this RCRP measure, better performance actually means lower emissions. So if we see a positive association with diversity later, it means diversity is linked to a reduction in those greenhouse gases.
That distinction is so important. It's like the difference between, I don't know, saying you'll run a marathon and actually crossing the finish line.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
But okay, to be confident in that link, the study's methodology must have been pretty solid. Can you walk us through how they made sure their findings were reliable, not just, some random correlation?
Absolutely. The research was quite rigorous. They analyzed a really substantial data set. We're talking 5,327 firm-year observations.
Wow.
Yeah, from European listed firms over 15 years, 2005 right through to 2019.
15 years, okay. Which countries?
A wide range. Major stock exchanges in the UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, Belgium, Denmark, Austria, Finland, Sweden, Netherlands, France, Switzerland, Norway, a good chunk of Europe. And to make sure they were really isolating the effect of gender diversity, they used some pretty advanced statistical methods. Specifically, they used something called firm fixed effects estimators.
Okay, what does that do in simple terms?
Well, it's a rigorous technique that basically helps filter out all the other unique, unchanging characteristics of each company over time. So it helps make sure they're really isolating the impact of gender diversity itself, not just other fluctuating business factors that might also affect emissions. They controlled for a lot of other things, too.
Right, trying to get as close to cause and effect as possible with this kind of data.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've set the stage. We know what they measured, the plans and the actual emissions, and how they did it rigorously. Now, let's get to the heart of it. What did this huge study, with all its careful data analysis, actually reveal? What's the connection between women in leadership roles and a company's carbon footprint? I feel like this is the core insight.
It really is. And the primary evidence is quite robust, actually. They found a statistically significant positive association between gender diversity in both corporate boards and executive management teams.
Both levels, okay.
Yes, both levels. And this positive association was linked to both the procedure-oriented performance, the PCMP,
The plans.
and the real carbon emission reduction, the RCRP.
The actual results.
Wow, okay. Yeah, so it's a strong overarching finding. And just to clarify the terms they used, WOB means women on boards.
Right, percentage of women directors.
Exactly. And WOM is women in management. That's the percentage of women executives among the total managers, but it excludes the board members.
Got it. So two distinct groups they tracked.
Yes. And what's also fascinating is how these roles seem to complement each other. The study found that the positive influence of women in management, the WOM, on both the plans, PCMP, and the results, RCRP, is actually reinforced when the firm also has a gender diverse board. So good WOB.
So it's like a multiplier effect.
Kind of. In fact, the relationship for WOM, for the women managers, was highly significant for firms with a diverse board. But get this. It was statistically insignificant for those firms without a diverse board.
That's a really crucial detail.
Yeah.
It suggests it's not just about, ticking a box and getting some women in the boardroom or just promoting some women into management. It's about having them present and, it seems, working in concert across both these really influential levels.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Like a holistic, integrated approach to gender-diverse leadership is what actually seems to drive the environmental outcomes.
Yes, the evidence points strongly in that direction. Female directors and executives seem to play these complementary roles, shaping the company's response to climate risks together.
And the paper digs even deeper, doesn't it? It sort of asks, okay, we see this link, but are all women directors contributing in the same way? Or are there specific roles or maybe attributes that really amplify this positive climate impact?
That's precisely the next layer they investigated. They look beyond just the numbers, the percentages, to unpack the nuances. For instance, female participation on specific board committees. That made a significant difference.
Okay, like which ones?
Well, female directors on the compliance committee showed a significant positive association with that procedural score, the PCMP.
So helping shape the policy.
Right. But even more impressively, female presence on both the audit and compliance committees was positively associated with the actual emission reduction, the RCRP.
Interesting. So compliance for the plans, but audit and compliance for the real results.
Seems that way. It implies women in these key oversight roles help companies not just create policies, but also, implement them effectively and ensure they're actually complying with sustainability standards.
So it's not just about who's on the board, but where they sit and what kind of oversight power they actually wield. That really highlights the strategic importance of those committee roles.
Exactly. They didn't stop there either. They also looked at the age of female directors. The study found that the age of female directors positively affects both PCMP and RCRP.
Older is better for climate action in this context.
The data suggests that. The thinking is perhaps older female directors, presumably with more experience overall, tend to be more inclined towards environmental policies and seeing them through.
Okay, that makes some intuitive sense. But then what about specific experience, like tenure on the board?
No, this is where it gets incredibly interesting and frankly a bit counterintuitive. Longer experience, measured as tenure on the board, of female directors actually had a negative association with RCRP, the real emission reduction.
Wait, really? Negative. Longer tenure was linked to worse emission reduction?
That's what the data showed.
That's genuinely surprising. Experience is usually seen as such a positive asset in leadership.
I know. It contradicts some common assumptions and even some prior research.
Did the researchers offer any theories about why? Why would longer tenure be negative for actual results, even if age was positive?
They didn't delve deeply into the why for that specific finding in this paper, unfortunately. It's one of those results that really makes you think.
Yeah.
You could speculate maybe it's related to becoming too comfortable with existing systems or perhaps less openness to disruptive green innovations that newer perspectives might champion. But the study itself didn't confirm that. It's an area for more research, definitely.
Fascinating.
Okay,
what else? Did they look at backgrounds?
Yes, their educational background also played a varied role, and this is where it gets really granular. Female directors with an educational background in law showed a significant positive impact on RCRP, actual emission reduction.
The lawyers making a difference on the ground.
It seems so. Their legal knowledge could be really instrumental in navigating all those complex sustainability regulations and ensuring effective compliance, which leads to real reductions.
That's quite a specific finding. So it really points to the type of expertise mattering a lot.
It really does. Because contrast that with female directors holding a PhD level education.
Okay, highly educated.
Yes, but they showed an opposite, a negative effect on RCRP.
Negative again, wow.
Yeah. And those with a business education, they tended to improve the symbolic stuff, the PCMP, the policies and procedures.
Right, the saying the right thing score we talked about.
Exactly. But not so much directly impacting the actual carbon emission reduction, the RCRP.
And what about finance backgrounds? Accountants?
Interestingly, female board members with accounting and finance backgrounds showed no significant effect on either measure, PCMP, or RCRP.
Huh. This really highlights that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, is it?
Not at all.
The specific skills, the background, the exact role, like being on the audit committee, they all contribute in very different ways. And some of these findings are quite unexpected.
Definitely nuanced.
So if we try to connect all these empirical findings, these data points, to the bigger picture, how can we understand why these relationships might exist? Are there theories that help explain this?
Yes, absolutely. These findings actually resonate strongly with several theoretical perspectives in corporate governance and behavior. They help us sort of understand the why. One key theoretical lens is gender socialization and ethicality theories.
Okay, what's the idea there?
The perspective suggests that perhaps due to upbringing, social interactions, women often approach morality and ethics differently than men. They tend, on average, to show greater sensitivity to ethical issues, societal challenges like climate change and community welfare,
Interesting.
and perhaps less driven by pure power motives, maybe more by values like tolerance, universalism, which could make them more proactive in addressing climate risks and minimizing environmental misconduct.
So a values-based difference potentially driving action.
That's one theoretical angle, yeah. Then there's diversity theory. This is maybe more familiar. It basically posits that gender diversity, well, any diversity really, improves board dynamics and the quality of decision-making.
Bringing more perspectives to the table.
Exactly. Diverse boards tend to have a wider range of perspectives. They foster more open discussion, encourage greater creativity, innovation in problem solving. And that can lead to more efficient decision-making on complex long-term things like carbon strategies and maybe spark more innovative green solutions.
Makes sense. Better decisions through broader input? Any others?
Yeah, one more key one is the resource-based view, or RBV.
Okay, resource-based view.
From this angle, women board members aren't just bringing diversity of thought, they're bringing valuable resources, human and relational capital.
Like what specifically?
Things like enhanced legitimacy for the firm, expert advice, potentially better external collaborations, access to crucial resources or networks. Their unique competencies and networks can really boost a firm's sustainability initiatives, especially these big, complex, often capital-intensive climate mitigation projects.
Right, so it's about the tangible and intangible assets they bring.
Precisely. So ultimately, these theories, they kind of work together. They collectively suggest women on boards and management play these deeply complementary roles. They influence the firm's leadership towards shaping climate agendas, from setting the high-level policies, the PCMP stuff, to ensuring substantive, target-oriented implementation on the ground, which leads to those reductions in actual greenhouse gas emissions, the RCRP.
That's a really powerful argument, connecting the individual findings to these broader theories about why diversity works. So, okay, let's bring it down to earth. If we take all these insights, the detailed findings about roles and expertise, the theoretical drivers, what are the concrete takeaways? What does this mean for companies, for policymakers right now who are trying to actually tackle climate change? This isn't just academic, right? It has real policy implications.
Absolutely. Very real implications. First and foremost, the evidence strongly suggests that promoting gender diversity is a significant lever we can pull to address the global climate crisis.
So diversity isn't just an HR issue, it's a climate strategy.
That's exactly what the findings imply. It really underscores the need to integrate gender diversity initiatives into climate change frameworks at the company level, the country level, even regional levels. Think about goals like the UK's net zero target or the EU's carbon neutrality project for 2050. This research suggests gender diversity is a tool to help get there.
Okay, that's a big one. What else?
Second, these findings essentially back up recommendations from global institutions, like the UNFCCC, the UN climate body. They've been calling for promoting gender-diverse leadership and participation, for gender-responsive action plans to mitigate climate risks, like in the COP25 Gender Action Plan from 2019. This study provides empirical support for those calls.
So it adds weight to what international bodies are already pushing for.
Exactly. Third, and this relates back to that complementarity point we discussed.
Right, the board and management working together.
Yes. Given those complementary roles, any gender-responsive corporate governance reform should really aim to promote diversity at both levels, not just the board, not just management, but both. This helps create a shared goal, that joint ownership you need for these really complex, expensive climate projects, right from the planning stages through to final implementation.
That makes sense. You need alignment top to bottom.
Precisely. And finally, the study's results also hint strongly at the importance of a critical mass of women on boards.
Ah, the idea that just one or two isn't really enough to make a difference.
Exactly. It implies that simply having token representation, one or two women, likely isn't sufficient. You need a certain number, a sufficient presence, to really exert significant influence on corporate climate strategies and effectively monitor how they're being implemented. That's what seems to enhance both the procedural side, PCMP, and, crucially, reduce the real carbon emissions, RCRP.
So quantity matters, up to a point, to achieve that qualitative impact.
It seems so. A critical mass seems necessary for real change.
Okay. Wow. So you asked us to deep dive into this connection between gender diversity and carbon performance. And what we've really uncovered is, well, it's a nuanced story, but also a powerful one. It seems pretty clear that the presence of women in corporate leadership, especially as we saw in specific roles like compliance and audit committees and with certain expertise like legal backgrounds, can significantly drive both a company's commitment on paper and their actual reduction in carbon emissions.
The link is definitely there in the data.
And this deep dive, I think it shows us that tackling climate change isn't just about technology or economics, important as those are. It's also profoundly about leadership. It's about diversity and the unique perspectives and perhaps values that different voices bring to the table.
Well said.
So, as you, our listener, consider companies and their environmental commitments, maybe you'll now look a bit more closely at the faces around their leadership tables. Does this research spark any new questions for you about how you understand corporate responsibility, about climate action, and maybe about what it really takes to build a sustainable future? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and stay well informed.